Good afternoon, everybody, on a snowy winter's day in Cambridge, or wherever you are. So it's a very strange AGM for me. First AGM I've done without shoes on. I'm sure that's probably the same for many people here. So we've got a packed business for the meeting. We're going to start with introductions, and I would like to invite all the trustees to do the introductions. Then we'll get into the formal AGM business. Then we'll have a break, and then we have our guest speaker, and then at the end we will have the Camcycle Awards. So everybody should stick around for that. And the intention is to close the meeting at 5 o'clock. With that, I would like to have the trustees introduce themselves. So first up is myself. So I'm Robin Hayden. I'm the current chair of Camcycle, and if I get elected, I might be the chair next year. So let's go round on my Skype view. So Alec, do you want to go next?
Hello there, I'm Alex Seaman. I have been a trustee now for a year, so this is my first anniversary. I'm a general trustee. I live on Romsey Mews, and I've been a lifelong cyclist.
Martin?
Hello everyone, I'm Martin Nick-Smith. I'm also a general trustee. I live in Petersfield, so I've been working quite heavily on the Mill Road campaign and various others.
Sandro? Alessandro?
Oh, hi.
Sorry, Alessandra. Sorry.
No problem. Hi, everyone. I'm Alessandra Caggiano. I'm a general trustee. I joined back in August, beginning of September, and I live in Cambridge. I've been living here for about 12 years now, and I'm a keen cyclist, and I've really enjoyed the first 6 months. So hopefully I'll get elected to do a little bit more work in the next year.
Robin, who's next? We can't hear you.
Finley. Sorry.
Hello everyone. Yes, so my name is Finley Knox McKim. I'm a general trustee as well, and I joined about a year ago, same time as Alec. Since being a trustee, I guess probably the first thing I did was working on getting the Adam Brooks barriers on the busway taken out, and then sort of been generally helping out with bits and pieces, still learning all the ropes and getting used to doing this. It's basically we started lockdown pretty much as soon as I joined, so it would be nice at some point to get re-elected and hopefully have a trustee meeting in person. So yeah, that's me.
Okay, great. Tom?
Hi, I'm Tom McCain. I've been a trustee now for 7 years. I'm not quite in Cambridge at the moment. I'm out in Histon, so a little bit further out. The main thing you perhaps want to know about me is I've got 2 kids, and that tends to be my focus for cycle campaigning. Which routes they're happy to cycle on, I'm happy to cycle on with them.
Matt?
You're still on mute.
Yeah, I know. I'm having trouble with my mute button here. Matt?
Hi, my name is Matthew Danish. I think I've been a trustee for about 4 years now. I tend to focus on the technical aspects of campaigning, planning on applications, consultations, engineering drawings, all that fun stuff. And I worked with a lot of community groups on various schemes that have come forward, especially from the Greater Cambridge Partnership. Yeah, so hopefully I'll continue after being elected again, if I'm elected again this year.
Okay, Chris?
Good afternoon, Chris Loughlin here. I moved down south from Scotland some 20 odd years ago to live in Fulbourn and didn't go back to Scotland. I put myself forward as a trustee and like to contribute to the work of the Camcycle by helping designing the projects and programs, but downstream looking at the ways we can maximize impact of our campaigns. Thank you.
Okay, and the other Chris?
All right, I'm also Chris. I am currently a trustee. For the past 4 years, I have been treasurer, but I've been a member of Camcycle probably for around 20 years, I guess. So lived in Cambridge long, and other than look after the finance side, tend to be interested in, like a lot of people, local issues, local cycle routes, what can be done to help improve the routes for cyclists in my local area.
Okay, and then Peter. Peter, you on mute?
Peter Gotham, moved to Cambridge 4 years ago, been a keen cyclist my working life. I'm a charity specialist accountant. So assisted in drafting the CIO resolution that is on the table today.
Okay, and then we also have a number of staff members with us. So Rosie, would you like to go first?
Hello everybody, I'm Rosie, or Rosamond, and I joined the Camcycle team in February last year, so right before things changed completely. But it's been a pleasure working with everybody this year, and yeah, looking forward to today and the rest of the year.
Hey, and Anna?
Hey everyone, I'm Anna, so I'm Communications and Community Officer for Camcycle, and I've been working here for nearly 3 years now, and before that I've been a member for about 15 years, and also did some volunteering on the magazine. And I have 3 young children, so I'm particularly interested in inclusive cycling, and yeah, how we can make our sort of towns and villages better for everyone.
Okay, and last but not least, Roxanne.
Hi, I'm Roxanne. I'm the Executive Director of Camcycle, and I've been here for, I think, six and a bit years. I think I've got that right. And just really, honestly, proud of the team we have here today. The work that's been done over the last year in just such incredibly challenging circumstances, and that we've still been able to get to this point of the AGM to celebrate a very successful year. So very, very proud of everybody. And I think we're all a bit tired, but it'll be nice to celebrate some positive things today.
Yeah, and I think we've had one apologies for absence from Willa. Willa is our current secretary, vice chair of the charity. Because of the pandemic, she's been prioritizing her work within the NHS, which is highly understandable. So she unfortunately can't be with us today.
I'll just point out we're missing Sue. Sue's in the meeting. Sue's another trustee, our membership secretary. So hi, Sue. Sue's still here as well.
Yeah. Hello. I heard a hello there.
It was Siri. Siri thought I was talking.
Siri saying hello on behalf of Sue. Okay. Sandra's now muted herself, so that's good. Okay, so I think we'll start on the formal business. So the first thing on the agenda is the approval of the previous minutes of the 2020 AGM, which was strangely in a building where we all were together. So if you've got any questions about that, then please place that into chat and we will see that. I must thank Tim for taking those minutes and for taking the minutes for this meeting as well. He's stellar at taking these minutes, and I really appreciate that. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions yet. So typically at this point, I would ask for a raise of hands for approval of the AGM minutes from the previous year. Yeah, so if you don't know, there is a chat facility within Zoom. On my iPad, you click on the 3 dots in the top right and click chat. I think on the PC version, there's an actual chat button. Looks like a speech bubble. So, yeah, so if there's anybody who wishes to raise a question, then obviously please put that into chat. Okay, then before, so I'm not sure how we can approve these minutes apart from just saying if anybody has any objections, then please object. Otherwise, we will approve them. Okay, then what I suggest is that we move to some items that Roxanne and Anna has, and I will monitor the chat to see if there's any objections. During that, and assuming there's no objections, then we'll do those minutes as approved. So Roxanne, over to you.
Thanks, Robin. We just had a few formalities to cover off at the start of the meeting. So just now that we're all here, I want to let everybody know that this webinar is being recorded and it will be published online. So at this point, your face can't be seen. We can't hear what you're saying unless you're specifically promoted to being a panelist. But if you're asking a question, we might mention your name and answer that question. So just to be aware that we will be putting this online in a slightly edited format later on. And also, we just had a quick little introduction to capture a couple of quick highlights of the year for Camcycle. So we will go through that. And then on to the formal part of the AGM, including the approval of the minutes. And I think all that needs is a seconder and a proposer, and then they are passed. But Anna is going to give a quick glimpse of the highlights of the year. And this is really drawing on the annual review that we put together, which you can download off our website. And that's also where you can get all the various papers that you need for this AGM. So we've got the agenda, the accounts, the trustees report and the annual review. So you can go to camcycle.org.uk/AGM-2021. So that's where you get the papers for the meeting. And just to let everybody know that if you registered for this meeting, you will have received an email with voting instructions if you're a member and you are able to vote. And voting will close at 5 p.m. at the end of this meeting for our treasurer election, our trustee elections, and our motion, which we'll go through in a little bit. So just let everybody know, check your emails, check that page on the website, and there's our fabulous annual review there. And Anna will just show you a few of the highlights, and then it's on to the formal business. I'll do the slides for you, Anna.
Thank you. Otherwise, we'll be going next slide. Okay, so as Roxanne said, this is just a quick summary of some of the things in the annual review, which you can find at camcycle.org.uk/annual reports. And then the annual review itself is a very condensed summary of what has been quite a busy year for Camcycle. So what did we do in 2020? We launched a campaign for Spaces to Breathe during the pandemic, one of Camcycle's biggest and most influential campaigns. Oh, speed up. Next slide. We welcomed some fantastic new cycling infrastructure in Cambridge, a Dutch roundabout and a really exciting Abbey Chesterton walking and cycling bridge over the Cam. We celebrated new school streets. This is from the video we made at St Philip's Primary School in Cambridge, and I just love it. If you look at the child riding at the front, how relaxed he is, and you know that's only really possible when road danger is removed. Next slide. We achieved some really significant campaign successes, including at Adams Road and Cambridge Station, and that was in collaboration with local groups. We continued our positive Mill Road campaign, and here it's not about cycling, it's about clean air, safe streets, reliable buses, a sociable community, thriving businesses, improving access for all, and benefits for everyone. We welcomed our third staff member who you met earlier. It's been great to have Rosie on board. And we also welcomed back 2 of our interns from 2019 who've been doing some amazing work on our policy project. There are 33 policies underway, 4 full drafts up on the website, 4 more coming soon, and they're providing really useful to groups already around Cambridge and even across the UK. We put our cargo bike and cycling volunteers to good use during the pandemic. 5,600 hand-sewn items, that's absolutely amazing. And we've got some more big numbers coming up in the next few slides. So volunteers distributed over 20,000 leaflets. I think that's possibly a new record. And definitely some new communities there as well, Milton, Abbey, Ward and things like that. We gained 1,400 members on social media, and we're up to about 10,500 overall. That's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn and YouTube. And finally, we reached a milestone of 1,500 members just in time for our 25th birthday on June the 16th. And many more have joined since then. It's really great to welcome you. Thank you for supporting Camcycle in this way. And to find out more, stay tuned for the rest of this AGM, ask any questions you'd like to via the chat, and head to our website to read that annual review at camcycle.org.uk/annual reports.
Okay, then let's move on to the formal approval of the AGM minutes. Would somebody like to motion for those to be approved?
Just need someone to say in the chat, I motion to approve, and someone to say, I second, and then they can be approved.
Excellent. Okay, we've got a motioner.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a seconder. Excellent. So I would like to formally mark those as approved. So let's move on to the chair's report. So I don't have any slides. I think this year, though, has been very challenging, not just from the point of view of being locked down, but actually just running the charity. So, you know, the year started well. We had a fantastic AGM. And then a few weeks later, we were all thrown into lockdown, confined to home. You know, some people thought the advice was you could only go outside for 1 hour walking or cycling. But still, it's been a very challenging year for lots of people, me included. Obviously, as Rosie said, we hired Rosie, and literally 3 weeks later, we were in lockdown. That lockdown forced us to change the way that the organisation operates. So the staff were confined to home. We distributed all of their normal work computers to their own homes, made sure that they were comfortable with good chairs and stuff like that as much as possible. And I think apart from the work-life balances, that's been going very well. So we have been having lots of trustee meetings, more than usual, to try to work out how the trustees can help the staff. One standing agenda item has been how have we been coping with the pandemic. And some of that means we've had to change the way we normally operate things. So, for example, distributing magazines, typically we've been hand delivering magazines to reduce the costs. And we've got a great group of volunteers who will happily take a few magazines and deliver them to their street. This year, because of the pandemic, we thought it was more prudent to actually use the postal service to do that. So, you know, that's certainly been a change in operations. And frankly, I would sooner go back to what we used to have, because while supporting the post office is a worthy goal, having volunteers distributing these for very low cost is also a very useful thing. As already been highlighted by Anna, we've had some fantastic infrastructure that has been built. Most of that was planned and was built before the pandemic started, so that's not really a 2020 thing. What has changed is government advice towards cycling. So LTN 120, for the geeks in the audience, is now the primary guidance from the Department for Transport on how to build cycle lanes. Now, that is useful, but we still need to hold people to account when they don't do that. So if somebody is proposing a road in a new development that has cycle lanes that are only 1.5 meters wide, then we need to point out that that's not actually the government guidance. So there's still an awful lot of work to be done there. Obviously, as part of the pandemic, the government announced a lot of work towards providing more space for walking and cycling. Some of that has happened within Cambridge, not as much as we would have liked, but some pretty significant changes to the environments on the road have gone in. And these have been introduced using experimental traffic regulation orders, which, you know, have always been part of legislation, but very, very rarely used within Cambridgeshire. So the use of emergency traffic regulation orders to introduce these measures could be seen as a precedent for trialing out other schemes. So whilst we currently have, for example, the Mill Road Bridge closed to private cars and open for people walking, cycling, and people on buses, we could also suggest that emergency traffic regulation orders could be trialled elsewhere. And we should see, hopefully, an appetite from councillors to acknowledge that these are a good way of trialling out schemes. Now, some of these I've absolutely enjoyed. The Nightingale Avenue, it went in as a bunch of concrete blocks, and now it's a bunch of nice little planters with trees in. You know, it's still not permanent, but it certainly looks a lot better. Stories Way, I still like the little cone on one of the bollards. I'm surprised it's still there, but it is. But, you know, Stories Way has now become an attractive way to cycle from one side of the city to the other, avoiding the city centre. And those are just two examples of changes that have been made. There's been many other changes. As I said, there's still not enough. And in the last few weeks, as you probably noticed, things are going backwards. So they are encouraging more cars to be on the road on Elizabeth Way Bridge. Okay, some of those cars have to be electric, but that is every single car being sold from 2035 onwards. So, you know, only a matter of time will that lane be completely and utterly congested, full of traffic. If a bus route goes along there, then that bus will be stuck in traffic as well, which is not the point of a bus lane. So we've been doing lots of campaigning on that. I was on the BBC on Thursday. We've got articles going into the Cambridge News, Cambridge Independent, a lot of local press. Road CC has picked it up. So there's a lot of press being put out there about how anti-cycling and how anti-coronavirus emergency measures this is. So one of the things that has been positive this year is that the central government has basically said to all local authorities and all areas, you need to prioritise people walking and cycling. That has popped groups up in places like Huntingdon, St Ives, Milton, just to name some, that have come to Camcycle to ask for our help. And, you know, not just in terms of the technical, what could we do, but also how do we campaign for that? And I have to have some great words for people who've helped out with that, not just Roxanne, but also Matt Danish, who's really been helping those groups achieve what they want to do. The problem, of course, with that is that what we would like to have is those groups speak with the same voice that we speak with. So come with the same set of policies. And so when one person or one group within the whole of Cambridgeshire, which is the Cambridge County Council, the traffic authority, when all of those groups ask for the same things for every single project. They start getting the idea that actually this is what all cyclists, all people who cycle want. As part of that, we've been pushing ahead with the policies project. That has been going forward very, very well this year. Some of those draft policies are up on the Camcycle website now, and it is a huge start for this. So apart from that, I really hope that 2020 is a better year for Camcycle. We've got some new trustees coming in with some new ideas. We've got some ideas that we've got in the motion for improving the organization of the charity itself, making it incorporated. And I hope the pandemic finishes and we can all go out on a cycle ride and, ride as a group to places like Reach, or even just Milton Country Park. Actually just to go out cycling with a group of people would be absolutely fantastic at this point. And I'm just so desperate to do that. So that's all I have. Does anybody have any questions for me? If you do, then please place them in the chat window.
We've had a special thank you from John Morris in the chat there, Robin.
Yes. So John Morris says, really appreciate the support, guidance, encouragement that Camcycle have provided for Hunt's Walking and Cycling Group. Special thanks to Roxanne and Matt for your help. Yes, I completely echo that. And thank you, John, for working with us. The louder our voice, the more likely that the people who make the decisions, whether they be officers or councillors, will listen to all of us.
And it sounds like we've got a lot more work to do this year as well, John. So looking forward to working with you some more.
Yes. I could have mentioned quite a lot of different campaign groups. Ely Cycling Campaign obviously has been very good for Ely. We worked with them on one of the roundabouts at Witchford that was designed to be pro-car and anti-walking and cycling, and we've hopefully turned that around. Katie Thornborough.
No questions, Robin, just praise.
just praise, yes. I'm quite happy to read out praise. Katie Thornborough said, thanks for Camcycle for raising walking issues too. Pedestrians need a voice in Cambridge too. Absolutely agree. My argument is always that as soon as I finish cycling and parked up, I'm now what is classified as a pedestrian. And, if that environment is terrible, then we haven't got anywhere. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions. So I'd like to now move on to the Treasurer's report.
Hello, thank you, Robin. Okay, so I will speak hopefully reasonably briefly on the Camcycle finances. I've just posted a link to the chat. The annual report section on the Camcycle website has the annual report and the trustees' annual report and financial statements. So the annual review document has some financial information and narrative, and then the trustees' annual report and financial statements is the slightly more formal version of the accounts and the report for the year. So we'll ultimately file both of those with the Charity Commission. So first thing to say is that there's been a reasonably significant change in how we report our finances this year. We've moved from simple receipts and payments accounts that just report transactions when we spend or receive cash, which are appropriate only for really very small charities. And we've moved to what's called accruals accounting, which is where we record transactions where they occur. And that basis is more representative of what's happening in the year, and it's more appropriate for an organisation as we grow. And as we'll see from the additional notes, it's the organisation is keen to be transparent, and it certainly improves the transparency of the organisation as well. So was quite a significant challenge. Part of it is that we have to fully comply with all the regulations, or almost all of the regulations for charity reporting, which is why the length of the financial statements has increased significantly. And I certainly couldn't have done that without a lot of help and assistance. So thank you very much to Peter Gotham for all his help and expertise in putting the accounts together. And also thanks to Brian Corbett, who stepped in at reasonably short notice to review these accounts. So these accounts have now been reviewed according to the Charity Commission procedures. So that's great. Thank you for that. In terms of what the accounts actually say, financially, it's been another successful year for the organisation. Although there have been a few significant impacts from COVID. The main one being the sort of financial implications of not running in-person events. So we didn't hold the Reach Ride, we didn't hold the Festival of Cycling, and things like monthly meetings, and anything in person has really not happened. What that means is there's a lot of costs associated with those that we haven't incurred this year, so costs have gone down, but those events tended to be run with supporting grants and sponsorship and the like. So we've lost the income that goes with those as well. That's the main impact of COVID. But what has happened is obviously it's been a really exciting year for cycling and for cycle campaigning. The government century, at least, has been helpful in terms of the new guidance and the new approach that they've handed down, and that has resulted in a lot of local initiatives on the ground, and that's where the change really has been happening, and where the arguments are needing to be won. And so, although the organisation has been restricted by not being able to meet in person, the staff have just worked incredibly hard and been very, very busy the whole year, supporting the initiatives we've had, like Spaces to Breathe, to support the new schemes that have been trialled locally, as well as contributing a seems like ever greater volumes of work around consultations and new developments and new cycling infrastructure. So it's the major cost of the organisation is the staff, but it's still very clear that there's more that we could do, and we are still resource bound by the capacity we have, and staff is one of those areas where more would result in more impact. In terms of income, as I already said, income related to a lot of the events is much lower. We continue to grow members, which is great because we get membership fees, and we haven't put up membership fees for a number of years now, but every increase in the number of members results in more membership income. But as you'll see from the accounts, the most significant part of our funding for the last several years has been significant individual donations, and we are extremely grateful to all the people that have supported the organisation and continue to do so. And that really has been transformative in terms of the impact that we're having. What's been really good over the last year, and I think probably partly in response to a lot of the extra activity we've been doing, is that we've seen more significant funders come on board. There was a £5,000 donation from ARM, who've seen some of the work we've been doing, and a number of additional individual donors have also contributed as well. So put the two together, income has actually gone up slightly, where increased individual donations has offset the income that we've lost for events that we've not held. The costs are reasonably significantly down, and so we did make a surplus for the year of about £25,000, which is good. We have a reserves policy. Our reserves are probably a little bit above where we want it to be, so we do have some capacity to use that to increase impact. And I think the trustees are looking at staff resources and how we can best use that to further the aims of the organisation. So that's the kind of overview of the accounts. There's much more in the documents. Other than that, just to say, this is my last year presenting the accounts. I've been treasurer for 4 years and standing down at the AGM. So just to wish my successor very best of luck. It's been really enjoyable and really rewarding working with such a great bunch of people. The staff are amazing, the commitment is amazing, and just the sheer knowledge and expertise within the trustees and the volunteers is something to behold. The organisation is moving forward, it's growing, it's getting better at what it's done, and yeah, so I'm still going to be around, still helping out, but very best of luck to everybody moving Camcycle forwards. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. All I'm seeing on chat is people saying great job and thank you and thank you and thank you and thank you and thank you. I will obviously echo that myself. Thank you very much for the hard work you've been doing for the last 4 years, and certainly in the last year moving to accruals accounting. You know, that's a big change for the organisation. And obviously also I have to echo your comments that thank you, Peter, for helping out with that move to accruals accounting. It's been transformative for the organisation. Do people have any questions on the Treasurer's report or the accounts themselves? If you've got any questions, please type them into chat. I'm not seeing any.
While we wait for questions, can I just sneak in here and add another huge thank you to Chris. Chris has gone above and beyond what I think would ever be expected of a treasurer for a small charity. Honestly, answering questions that I have quite frequently, quite urgently sometimes. And it's just been an absolute pleasure to work with you, Chris. And I just know that I would not have been able to do anywhere near the work I've been able to do this year if it hadn't been for this year, for the last 4 years without your support. Really appreciate it. And it's just been an absolute transformation behind the scenes, what we've done with our finances. I mean, Camcycle has just become more and more complicated as we've hired more staff, got more members, we've had to bring in new systems. It's been a huge amount of work, and I just appreciate everything you've done, Chris, so much. So thank you, and enjoy having a bit of a rest.
Yeah, more time.
I'll try not to ask any more questions.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions. I'm just seeing more thank yous for the very clear and informative presentation of the accounts. So I think we need to move to the formal approval of these accounts. So again, just like the minutes, we need a motioner and a seconder. So would somebody like to motion for those approvals? Monica has proposed the accounts to be approved. Now we just need a seconder. Peter has put his thumb up, which I presume means seconding. Okay, thank you, Peter. So I believe those accounts are approved. Chris says that if anybody has any additional questions on the accounts, then put them in chat and he will answer those accordingly. Now, the next item on the agenda is the incorporation of the charity. So just some background on this. Currently, Camcycle is an unincorporated association. So that means we're just like a, well, let's start again. So we're an unincorporated association. That means that we are registered with a charity commission. We have a charity registration number. However, all the trustees are personally liable for anything that happens in the charity. So if somebody sues the charity, what they're doing is suing the individual trustees of the charity. We have been discussing over the last year or so moving to a different form of charity called a charitable incorporated organization. This is the equivalent of a public limited company from a company's house point of view. So it means that the charity itself is a separate legal entity, and that the trustees are not liable for every single action within that charity. So that's my simplistic view of the world. We have a more detailed background of this in the agenda pack on page 7. To move to a CIO, we would need to do a few things. We need to move to accruals accounting, and as Chris has just mentioned, we have completed that change. So the other thing we need to do is have a new constitution, or we may need to have a new constitution. There are some things that have come up in the last few years where we've checked with the Constitution, and the Constitution either has been very silent about a particular issue, and therefore the trustees have just made an arbitrary decision at that point, and therefore that may be something we wish to codify in the Constitution. Or we may wish to tighten the Constitution in other areas. For example, quorum rules for a trustee meeting. We're not intending on changing the 6 main objectives of the charity. Those would stay the same. So from a what do we do point of view, then nothing changes with the charity at all from an outside point of view. One thing that does change is we'd need to change our charity number, because a charitable incorporated organisation is a completely separate legal entity from the existing Camcycle charity. That may also mean that we could look at changing our name. Again, that's not something that we're currently thinking about, but it's something that we could think about. The other interesting thing about this is that as a CIO, charitable incorporated organisation, we have to be more professional, and therefore, from a reputation point of view, from a credibility point of view, it's very good for Camcycle in its own right. There was a question on this around what would it mean for trading income, and I'm not the best person to answer that, but I would like to invite Peter to see if he could answer this.
There's no underlying difference in the VAT law or indeed the corporation tax law relative to unincorporated associations or CIOs, as far as I'm aware. So it shouldn't make any difference to that.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So that is the motion on the table. The resolution is that the Board of Trustees review the legal structure of the charity and consider whether incorporation should be pursued, and if this is agreed, to review the charity's constitution. Now, normally we would have a discussion around this. Obviously, if you've got any questions, then please put that into chat. So there's a question from Wookie. Sounds like you've already considered it really, and the chance of deciding not to do it is negligible. We have discussed it, but we haven't discussed it in a level of detail that means that we would then come to a future EGM or AGM with an absolute vote to change the organisation. Previously, the trustees didn't have the experience to really help make that decision. With Peter coming on board, we now have what I would call a subject matter expert in this area, and that you know, he can really help us move forward with this. This doesn't mean that we are bound to go down this route. If there's something that comes up that is not agreeable to trustees, then this motion allows us to come back and say, no, we decided not to do this. What this does do, though, is mean that we will report back to members as to this motion. As before, as I was trying to allude to before, a detailed proposal will be presented to members before we implement this change. So all this is doing is obtaining members' approval in principle to allow work to be done and research to prepare the change. This may require more time and effort from both staff and trustees. So this, we think, requires a motion. So just to remind people that the motion is one of the items that you can vote on in the election link that you were emailed on Friday morning. So we're not doing the vote on the call itself. So what you need to do is go dig out that email from Friday morning. And then the second question on that is the motion question. Okay, so there's an answer from Chris. I'll read that out. So if a charity does want to do more significant trading to raise income for the charity, the usual approach is to set up a trading subsidiary company that gives its profits to the charity. We're a long way away from that, but being a CIO may make it a lot easier from a legal structural point of view to set up a trading company at a later point in time. Okay, I'm not seeing any additional questions. So just a reminder, the motion and the background to the motion is on page 7 of the agenda pack. And seeing no extra questions, I think we now come to Roxanne and the Camcycle 2021.
Thanks, Robin.
Sorry to interject, Robin. As a housekeeping point, presumably the votes are going to be counted at 5 o'clock, aren't they? So all we've done now is consider it in case some people, well, obviously in case people wanted some more information, but also to assist those who haven't yet made a decision to do so.
Yes. So Bev asked the question, how long do we have to vote? And the voting closes at the end of the AGM at 5 p.m. So, the voting opened Friday morning. And so it's been 24 hours for people to be able to vote on this. And we've also raised it here just in case people have questions. Okay, Roxanne, I think it's over to you now.
Great. And we have a 15-minute break in the middle of the AGM before our guest speaker starts. So there is a bit more time if anyone wants to send a message or needs a bit more information or can't work out the voting, there's some time there to work through that. And I think it looks like some discussion will continue in the chat as well. But if we need a bit more time, we'll find some time to answer any more questions. In the meantime, I'll give a bit of an update on plans for 2021. And I guess I just need to start by saying 2021 is going to be another interesting year. And so everything needs to be taken, I suppose, with a grain of salt or a heavy pinch of salt, in that there just is not a lot of certainty other than things will be different and uncertain. And it's not just the impact of the pandemic itself that means things change, but the impact of uncertainty means that we can't plan like we may have. We can't invest in maybe putting forward ideas for projects or events that have a high rate of or a high risk of cancellation. So there's the things we have to do for the pandemic, and there's the things that we have to do because of uncertainty. So unfortunately, that means things like the Reach Ride, we just can't plan for. But normally with the Reach Ride, we'd already be putting in grant applications, getting sponsors lined up, and having interesting meetings with the council about risk. So the fact that we already can't do those things because we just don't know what will be happening in May means that the Reach ride is off the table this year. Also, that means that monthly meetings in person are something that we need to put on hold for now, where we've got our online meetings. We can review how things have gone after the AGM using this form of Zoom and see if there's a way we can help make the online experience a bit better. But for now, there's no plan to be implementing any in-person monthly meetings or events, socials, anything like that. So it feels really sad to start off the AGM, here's what we're going to do next year with, well, here are all the things we actually can't do. It also means that the Festival of Cycling is very unlikely to be going ahead. Again, that's something where the work starts now. We need to be applying for grants. We need to be working on sponsorship and partners and locations. And again, with all this uncertainty, we won't get the sponsors or the grants that we need. We just can't invest staff time in something that has a high risk of not happening. So all those things are off the table, but that means we get to work on other things instead. And we do have some exciting things that we can look forward to. So what I'm going to do is take a little break, and I will let Jim Chisholm give us an update. Jim, give me one moment and I will just turn this part on. They keep moving the things around each time I share the screen. So one moment while I find Jim, everybody. There we go. Jim, you should be good to go if you unmute and turn your video on. Now, it would be much easier if this was in person and I could just walk across the room and give Jim the microphone, but Jim needs to find his own microphone. So hopefully that doesn't take long at all.
Okay, right.
There we go. We've got you.
We can hear you.
Okay, right. Well, I say welcome. Roxanne and I had a very useful Teams discussion with a couple of senior officers and councillors the other week. We all realise that the recent very wet weather may result in some delays, but there is a very clear commitment to complete this project. I'm also pleased to be able to read the following statement from the Greater Cambridge Partnership. Update on the Chisholm Trail. Work has continued on the site of the Abbey Chesterton Bridge since its installation last November. The recent heavy rains have made the site more difficult to work on due to the high water levels on the Cam and stronger river flows. This means that while we still anticipate the opening of the jetty path NCN 51 linking Stourbridge Common with Ditton Meadows early this year, the project team do not have a confirmed date at present and will update as soon as possible. Work started on the Coldham's Common section on the 15th of January 2021. And finally, planning work is continuing for the installation of the underpass under Newmarket Road. This will require the closure of Newmarket Road to all traffic, including cycles and pedestrians, for around a week. The project team's current planning assumption is that this will happen during the first week of the Easter school holidays. While the road closure in place, there will be clearly signed diversion routes appropriate for all traffic, including buses and as well as cycles and pedestrians. End of GCP statement. I still do hope the jetty path will be open before the Newmarket Road closure. We will continue to press for progress on the agreements for phase 2. Thank you.
And just to clarify, my understanding is the Easter holidays is Monday 29th of March to the 9th of April.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jim. So some really good news and some really positive infrastructure that we can look forward to. And we'll just have to see as we get closer to the day how we can celebrate the opening of the first sections of the Chisholm Trail. But thank you for the update, Jim. Okay, so back to 2021. So having talked about what we can't do and celebrated some of the infrastructure that we hope to see soon, I'll just come back around and revisit our vision for well, Camcycle's vision for cycling. So we all know that we're here for more, better and safer cycling for all ages and abilities in and around Cambridge. And this will still be what we're working for this year. And I can see that Monica's asked for this as a poster, and I think that's a brilliant idea, Monica. So we will get to when we can print things and distribute them again, we'll have this vision out there as a poster. And so our campaigning will still focus on these areas and highlighting even more how important safe cycling infrastructure is for happy, healthy people. We're in a pandemic. We're finally realizing that we need that space to breathe, that space to go and exercise right from our doorstep, and that cycling is a key part of the transport solution when we can't use public transport in such great amounts. But also realizing the impact of air pollution on our health, particularly our lungs, has hopefully helped people to realize that we really do need to be looking at how we can clean up our air and get more people cycling. And people have had a chance to see what it could be like during this pandemic when there was significantly less traffic on our roads. We really need to capture the public imagination now. Well, they've seen it. They can actually realize that this could be done, and we need to build on that moment. A thriving and sustainable region, we need to recover not just our health, but our local economy after this pandemic, and cycling will play a huge part in that. If we bring in these changes to the infrastructure, there's huge potential for local businesses to do more with cargo bikes and cycling logistics. So there'll be a big part of that. I'm tongue-tied today, there's too much going on, but cycling will have a big part to play in how our region recovers. And if we want everybody to be able to cycle, then we need to be understanding what it's like when you don't cycle already. It's easy for us to say, get on a bike and off you go. But for a lot of people, they might not believe that's possible. It's been amazing to see how many people have started cycling during the pandemic, but we need to keep that going. Even in a place like Cambridge, even when we have such high rates of cycling, there's still work to be done to understand those barriers. So the kind of projects that might come into play here are things like school streets. So if we can get more children cycling to school at a young age, that's hopefully something they'll take with them into the future and improve their health. And we've seen with the St. Philip's School Street, Anna and I went down and we spoke to some parents there, and people have started cycling because of the school street that's been put into place. So focusing on children and schools will be really important. We have to keep pushing the importance of cargo bikes, and we're hoping to do a cargo bike project this year. There was meant to be a grant in place, but the pandemic has changed things, so we've got to revisit how that might look. So I just want to remind everyone that we're still focusing on this vision, but we have to work out what those key messages are that will resonate with people in 2021. So it's getting our economy back up, it's helping with our health, and also climate change. I think people are really feeling that a lot more. A few years ago, we may have been a bit hesitant about being too strong on the environment and climate change because people maybe weren't ready to hear those messages. But I do think that the public is there now. There is so much more about climate change. So it is time for Camcycle to start tying in our campaigning messages with the importance that cycling will play in decarbonising our transport system. So I've wandered around a bit there, but we're tying our work in with our vision. But the trick is, what does that look like when we can't do events and we can't go out in places in person? And I think that we've proven in the last year that we can campaign so effectively in this situation and in this environment. In some ways, it's almost expanded our reach, because before maybe we wouldn't have met with someone because it was too hard to get there. But now that everybody's online and using Zoom and so on, we've been international, we've been national, and we've been all across the region. So it's really important that in the coming year that we do look at the region and we work with more and more of those local groups and people that are popping up around the place. The decisions about transport for Cambridge City are not being made by Cambridge City. They are being made by the Greater Cambridgeshire Partnership, by the combined authority. So we can't be a small city asking for special treatment, we need to be a region making the case for cycling. So if we have people from across the region talking to the combined authority, to the mayor and to GCP about cycling, it's a very different ask. It helps the city, but we as the city here, Camcycle, we have all this knowledge and resource and understanding that can benefit people across the region. So it wins. It's a win-win for both situations, for the city, for the region, but also it's just the right thing to do. People are cycling in from places like St Ives and further afield into Cambridge, as well as across the region to other villages. So it will be really important for us going forward that we're looking at that regional model, and the work needs to be done this year to really understand what that should look like. I can see John's pointing out in Cambridgeshire rather than in and around Cambridge. That's something we need to look at, but setting a hard border can be quite challenging when we're not quite there yet. But John, it'll be people like you that we need to talk to understand how does this kind of regional model work. And we've been able to test out a lot of ideas and models over the last year, and that's giving us this idea of where we need to go. So I'd love to come to you with a really fantastic polished strategy and say, here's how it's all going to go. But the whole process of doing a strategy in 2020 just got wiped off the table, and it became emergency strategies with how do we deal with the pandemic. And we re-strategized and re-budgeted numerous times throughout the year just to make sure we were able to respond to the conditions we had. So there is no polished strategy here, but the point is we had our strategy day in November 2019, and the big question that really sort of came out of that is where does Camcycle sit in terms of grassroots and setting the agenda? And these aren't either or, but there are these two sort of balances that we need to keep the balance between these. So broadly for 2021, when we're looking at really supporting and developing that grassroots campaigning that Camcycle is so brilliant for, it starts with supporting and encouraging local campaigners and their local campaigns. And I just think we proved in 2020 how effective a bit of Camcycle support can be to get local people campaigning. And we need to build on that even more this year. And Robin mentioned that our cycling policy project, that's a key part to just getting the points down so that everybody knows where we stand, everybody knows what the position is, and they can go forward and do that campaigning. It's very difficult when only a few people in the organisation have the knowledge and you have to get an answer from a Robin or a Matthew Danish or a Martin Lucas Smith or a Roxanne. But if we have that information out there so it's quick and easy for people to get to, it will make quite the difference. There's a lot of work there. This project, I don't think it will be finished in 2021. It's sort of, when we had our interns working on this, we were getting to the point of having one policy a month, and we've still got about 30 to do. So we're chipping away at it, but anyone who wants to get involved and help would be very, very much appreciated. And we've also realized that we need to be doing more for the region, as I mentioned, and this year will be about just locking down what those resources are, what those models are, what kind of support is appropriate for people in the region. Is it that they are completely part of Camcycle, or we just send someone out to help them? We need to understand how this works. And I think 2021 will just be about further experimenting and trialing some options to see what works for people. Our campaigning leaflets, Anna mentioned we distributed 20,000 of those this year, but I think we can do much more this year, provided we're allowed to go out and into the community and touch things and deliver things into people's houses. That these have been a huge success at reaching out to people who, despite all the work we do, still don't know about Camcycle, but getting something through their letterbox means that we're more likely to get their attention. And we saw when we did leaflets in Chesterton recently, I think we got 10 or so new memberships almost immediately. So it helps us to get new members. It's resonating with people. And I'm sure there are plenty of people who we've not even spoken to who did go and take a campaigning action as a result of that leaflet. So let's get beyond Romsey, Mill Road, Chesterton and Abbey and Milton. Let's find some other wards where we can get these leaflets going. The key thing to have this work is to have a lead volunteer for that area. So if you would like to be a lead volunteer to help coordinate the leaflets in your area, please get in touch, because if we've got that, then basically we can do the rest, but we just need that champion who can basically have the leaflets in their house and give them to the people in their local area. We'll find you the rest of the people, we'll get you the leaflets, we just need that person. So, and yes, Margaret, we do distribute to places of work if we have workplace champions who can do the distribution for us. So the other big thing that will be coming up in 2021 will be the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. And so we must make sure we're responding to this, because it's a government requirement that local authorities have their LC WIP so that they can get funding for various schemes. So getting it in the LC WIP will make a huge difference. And again, this is not being done at the city level, this is being done at the regional level. So we need to be helping people across the region to contribute to the LC WIP. We might not know the answers, but we can reach out to parish councils or various people that we might have connections with and say, do you know about this? Are you putting in your ideas? Can we help you? Do you know what kinds of things you can be asking for? So that's just an idea of some of the things that we should be working on the grassroots end of our work in 2021. At the other end, we had this big, bold, setting the agenda, Camcycle out, leading the way, rather than responding to planning applications and consultations, sort of telling the world what should be done. And we need to keep doing that in 2021. And again, we saw this past year just how strong we can be when we do that work. Our Spaces to Breathe campaign was well out ahead, and not just locally, but even in the region. We were presenting that to people across the UK, and they were able to learn from our theory of change and our approach to this campaign to help build their own local campaigns. So what will it be for this year? And that's something that Anna and I are working on, and Anna is just amazingly talented at this and will help shape this brilliant campaign along those things I mentioned earlier around cycling to school and climate change. So we're working in that direction. I also mentioned how important it will be to keep tying into the pandemic and into COVID, and what this should be changing so much about our society, and we need to make sure that cycling and active travel and safer places to live and breathe are part of that solution and part of our collective vision for the future. We'll also need to be keeping an eye on what's going on with the government with their gear change vision. So we were so excited to see that come out in 2020. Lots of great things were said. Now we need to see lots of great things be done. Where we should be seeing the launch of Active Travel England. So we need to join the national voice in calling for this, but we also need to do our part locally to translate what that is. So Active Travel England, it should be a body that measures local authorities on their performance for active travel and then determines what future funding they are able to get. We don't know the details yet, but it will be really important that we're communicating that to local councillors and decision makers so that they understand how serious this is and that they do need to get on with active travel and with cycling. And we've already seen that if we help communicate that to councillors, it really speeds up their learning process. And rightly so, councillors have got a lot on their plate right now. So let's do what we can to help explain this and to help them make decisions in line with what the government is proposing. We also have a lot of big developments coming our way. And Camcycle's position on growth is neutral. We are not saying that we are for or against those developments, but if development is happening, it has to be done properly so that active travel is enabled in those developments, but also we have to look at the impact on the transport system that those developments will have on the surrounding region. So we need to be making sure developments are thinking about cycling from the very beginning, from the land use planning. This means we could be 10, 20 years ahead of anyone actually moving into that development. But we've seen the great work Camcycle can do. Robin, you've done amazing work with Water Beach, with the new town. That's been going on since well before I joined Camcycle, but it has shaped how that development is laid out well before anything has ever been built. We're seeing things like this coming along for Northeast Cambridge, for East Cambridge, and we need to make sure that Camcycle is influencing how that is laid out. So very quickly, we will keep doing our award-winning magazine. We will keep responding to planning applications. We will continue our incredibly strong engagement with the media. We are in the paper every week. We must continue to improve our stakeholder communications. We're doing more and more to keep councillors informed and up to date. We're trying to do more with schools, and we'll just be adding more stakeholders. Margaret mentioned workplaces. We'd love to do more with workplaces to proactively get that communication out there. We'll keep growing our membership. We must increase and diversify our income, and we'll keep hosting events online. A few projects that are on the table for this year, depending on how things balance out with the pandemic, at our next rebudgeting and our next re-strategizing. The work to upgrade our website will continue so that it's easier for people to find those resources we're putting out. We are discussing the hiring of a new staff member, a technical lead. We've seen from the amazing work that Matthew Danish has done over the last well, the whole time he's been involved, but particularly the last year, by going out to these communities, helping these campaigners with the technical support they need to really understand what they can ask for, what is possible in their region. It makes a huge difference. Having that support to translate planning applications and consultations will make a huge difference. Anna and I are spending an incredible amount of time doing that, but that means we're not being as effective with the communications and the engagement and the outreach and the stakeholder meetings. So we're exploring the need for someone in this role. There's quite a bit of work to be done there. So this is not me saying this will happen, but to let members know that these are conversations that we're having with staff and trustees. Ultimately, it will come down to income. So there is a big piece of fundraising work that needs to be done there, but this role will enable a huge amount of impact to get more and more people campaigning in their local areas because they'll have the knowledge to do so. Behind the scenes, there's still more work to do with systems. We've got to explore this movement to a CIO, what the impact will be on our finances, our finance processes and systems. That keeps going. We want to do more to improve the volunteer experience. We need better resources and inductions and so on in that area. So that hopefully will translate into some online workshops. Now that we've got used to this technology, it's probably a great way to engage with more volunteers. And I mentioned also the school streets campaigning that we are hoping to do. So that's a snapshot. And if you would like to get involved, if you're not a member already, please do join Camcycle. Perhaps you could talk to your workplace about becoming a corporate supporter. We're seeing more corporates coming on board of all shapes and sizes, and would love to be able to show that this is not just people who ride a bike that support what we're asking for, but this is businesses and local organizations that agree with this. You could sponsor or host an event. It's a bit more challenging in this online world, but there is still a way that we could do something together. Advertise in our magazine. Of course, donations, we've mentioned the need to increase and diversify our income, so donations are always welcome. But most importantly, you can volunteer and you can get involved. So would you like to write an article for our magazine, help deliver leaflets or be the area coordinator for leaflets for your area, help organize an event, write a letter on one of the many campaigning issues that we're working on. You can help contribute to our policy documents, or why not even come and have a chat about what it's like to be a trustee. So I've got 1 minute left, bang on time, to let everybody know that we're now about to go to our break. I'll be around during the break if you want to ask any more questions. And just to remind everybody that we're also electing our trustees. You met our existing trustees at the start of the AGM, as well as our two new candidates, Chris and Peter. So Peter is standing for the position of treasurer and Chris for the position of general trustee. So just a reminder during the break, if you haven't done so, to go and vote. And these are the instructions if you've not seen them, but it is all in your agenda pack. But thank you so much for joining us for the formal part of the AGM. We now have a 15-minute break, and then we'll be back with our fantastic guest speaker, Melissa Bruntlett. Thanks.
Thank you, Roxanne.
Okay. Welcome back, everybody. We're just having a minor technical difficulty. We're just getting some new headphones for Melissa so that her audio is a bit clearer, because it was quite quiet on my end, at least. But in the interim, if anyone's had any questions come to mind while they've been on the break, feel free to ask them now and we shall answer if we can. No, all the comments are just about delicious snacks that people are eating during the break. Well,
Making me feel hungry now.
I think we should have called this the cats and candies webinar or something. Excellent. I'll pop us back to the agenda while we wait. And just let everybody know that we have finished the formal part of our AGM. So we've had our chair's report, the accounts have all been approved. So we are just about to kick off with our guest speaker, Melissa Bruntlett. And Melissa will speak for about half an hour, and we will then have some questions, and then we'll wrap up the AGM with a lovely positive ending, which is our Camcycle awards. So do stick around for those, because we have some amazing people that we are celebrating. But Melissa is back, so we'll do a sound check, Melissa.
How's that? Is that better?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Much better. Excellent. Great. So that means we are on track, and I shall introduce our guest speaker. Okay. So I would like to welcome Melissa Bruntlett to the Camcycle AGM. Now, Melissa, many people attending this meeting, probably everybody, will be very familiar with who you are, because your book is very well known in our community, and we've even had it reviewed for our magazine. But I first mentioned to Melissa how great it would be if we could have you come to Cambridge, well, over a year ago now, when I saw you.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, and we were talking about how great if you could come over and we could give you a tour of Cambridge and do all these wonderful things, and it's not come to fruition, but at least with the benefit of the internet, we can still have an international speaker. So I'll let everyone who maybe doesn't know, so Melissa is a Canadian author and urban mobility advocate who strives to communicate the benefits of sustainable transport and inspire happier, healthier, and more human scale cities. And as I mentioned, Melissa is the co-author of Building the Cycling City, the Dutch blueprint for urban vitality. And this book certainly connected with a lot of people, I think, even though it was written for a North American or about North American communities. And it is fantastic to hear that you've got another book on the way, which I'm sure you'll mention. But I think what's really interesting is since you wrote that book, you and your partner and your children have moved to the Netherlands from Canada, and you're now living in Delft. And I think that a lot of us would like to know, does the reality live up to the dream? Because I'm sure there are many people here who would love to pick up and move to a cycling paradise. So does the reality live up to the dream? And perhaps mention a little bit about your work with Mobicon, so a consultancy across the Europe and North America promoting Dutch transport. But I'm sure you'll do a much better job of telling us what it is that you do. I will shut up now and pass it all over to you, Melissa. The floor is yours.
Ah, thanks. Am I able to share my screen now? Is that?
Yes.
Of course, now I can't even, it's been so long since I've done this in Zoom. I'm trying to remember how to share my screen.
Hopefully down the bottom.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, there we go. We work in teams at the office. So yeah, it gets, sometimes I forget where I am and what I'm presenting on. Okay.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so first off, yes, Roxanne, thank you so much for inviting me and for the board for having me. It's a pleasure to be able to speak to you today. And yes, I would have loved to have been able to visit Cambridge. Chris, my husband, is from England originally and moved to Canada when he was 10, but I've had the opportunity to travel mainly to just London and then the Midlands where he's from. So it would have been nice to travel somewhere different, but for another day, because I'd really like to cycle around, and I've heard a lot about Cambridge and what you guys have been doing. So it would be a pleasure to come. And I really liked the opportunity today to join you for this theme of spaces to breathe, because I think it really resonates with my experience since moving here, especially this year in terms of the changing circumstances with the pandemic and how we experience the city. So thank you. And today I'm going to talk probably a lot more about that sort of qualitative experience rather than looking into more of the like quantitative or infrastructure focused conversation, because yeah, that's where this new book goes to, and I'm really interested in trying to push the conversation in that direction. So as Roxanne has mentioned, my name is Melissa Bruntlett. I am Canadian, and we moved to the Netherlands in February of 2019, when I started working for Mobicon, which is a consulting firm working in sustainable transport largely, but I work with the international team, which means our focus is mainly on cycling and bringing Dutch knowledge outside of the Netherlands to the UK, to places in Europe and throughout North America, and showing how a lot of the plans and policies that have been put into place here can be and are being applied in various other cities. So we've been doing a lot of work in Canada and the US, especially in terms of retrofitting streets, traffic calming, network planning, and policy and best practice development. So my job is to promote all of that work and help everyone understand what it is that we're doing and what we're capable of. And then at the same time, for over 10 years now, I've been working in cycling advocacy. So prior to moving to the Netherlands, I was living in Vancouver, Canada, where there was this real push starting in about 2007 to bring cycling up to a higher standard, to be more accessible to more people. My family benefited from that because we sold our car in 2010 and decided to make use of a lot of this investment by cycling more with the children. At the time, they would have been 1 and 3, using public transport, which was very accessible for our family to get us the places the bike couldn't. And then we were living in a very walkable community. So our experience really pushed us to start to advocate for even more in the city of Vancouver. And so now it's nice to be over here and kind of doing the same thing, but advocating for what we experience every day to be in every other city, so that everyone can enjoy more cycle-friendly, human-friendly streets. Yeah, so what brought me here? Well, Vancouver was absolutely lovely. If you've ever traveled there, it's this beautiful sort of picturesque, it's called the Glass City, settled between the ocean and the mountains, and we loved it there. There was a lot of really progressive thinking, a lot of infrastructure going in. So when we first moved there was a lot of neighborhood bike streets, but then over the course of the coming 10 years, we started seeing more and more separated infrastructure, which made it really safe and comfortable for our family to get around. And just overall, it was just a really great place to spend the first 10 years of our kids' lives, or first 12, I guess, with our daughter. But we reached a point where we wanted to slow down. So we had traveled here in 2016, experienced what quieter cities could be like when you can still move around and walk around and cycle around. And we wanted to experience that in Canada as well. But unfortunately, outside of the major city centers, most small, more suburban or residential areas don't have that same quality of life that we'd really come to enjoy. And having experienced what we had here, it sort of seemed like the natural next phase for us. So through the research that we had done for the book and a lot of interviews that we had done for Building the Cycling City, Chris and I both made some pretty important connections, mine being Mobicon, and said, we'd like to move over. Do you have a job by chance? And as luck would have it, they did. So we moved from the city of Vancouver with about 675,000 people, over 115 square kilometers, to Delft with just over 100,000 people in 24 square kilometers, which arguably is probably the same density almost, but you can reach any part of the city within 15 minutes. It's a lot calmer and quieter. And so it really sort of fit what we wanted. We're really close to cities like Rotterdam. We're just 40 minutes away on the train from Amsterdam. So we still have access to the city, but now we can live with the same quality of life, just a little more comfortably and quietly. And that's really sort of our journey to find more space for us, as you will, to find a place that suited where we wanted to go and fit, yeah, that idea of really being able to reduce a bit of the stress that was going on in our lives. And I think we always knew it would be different here, but we didn't know how different the experience would be, and we're actually quite surprised. And a lot of that we found through our research really comes into that impact that traffic calming has had in the city of Delft and in many other Dutch cities, where the neighborhood we were living in, although it was a very walkable community, one of the most walkable in the city of Vancouver, within the surrounding major streets or arterials, 150,000 cars a day were passing through this small little area of about 4 blocks or so. So this was the stress that we would experience every time we wanted to walk to the major shopping street to do our groceries, taking our kids to school, getting to work ourselves. And so although the neighborhood itself was very community oriented and we felt very connected to it, there was always these moments of stress that bordered every day. And now in the neighborhood we live in, just around 1,500 cars per day pass through this neighborhood. And so it's a stark difference. It's like a scale of 10 times less cars traveling in and around our space. And these are on streets that, as you can see from these photos, are often barely enough to fit 2 cars passing in terms of the neighborhood streets. And then the arterials nearby are often no more than 2 to 2.5, maybe 3 lanes of traffic, depending on if there's a turning lane. So it's all very, very calm. And now we have this experience where we're not stressed about traveling across 6 lanes of traffic with small children who are arguably now not that small. But still, like, this reduction of stress in our daily lives because of the reduction of traffic has had a huge impact on how we experience the city, and one that we didn't fully expect. And of course, there's still that access to nature. I feel it's really important to remind people that even if we have traffic calm streets, it doesn't mean we have to forget about the rural areas. And so within 15 minutes, we find ourselves cycling among nature on these connected pathways that will get us pretty much anywhere we need to go. So now this scene is a little more part of our regular weekend and when we need to de-stress a little bit more. But yeah, just having that calm city, that calm space, but then still being able to access nature nearby has been really vital. I mean, for us in the last 9 months or so, in terms of maintaining some sense of sanity in this a little uncertain world. But it's just this surprising effect that we weren't fully anticipating when we moved here. And so these low stress environments have become really vital for us. And so this is actually a picture from our former back terrace in the last place we were living in, which is not far from where we're living now. And we were backing onto a car park. And when I think about that juxtaposed with what we would experience in that environment in Canada, we'd have a lot of idling cars, probably people honking at each other, just constant movement in and out of vehicles. But this terrace, where we spent countless hours over the last few months and the year before when we moved here, summer evenings just sitting out reading, enjoying a show on Netflix or having our morning coffee, it was always a very calm environment. And so that's had a huge impact on our ability to just get through the day-to-day, stay calm raising teenagers, and stay calm with busy work schedules. And it's such an important thing that I think we often forget about when we're thinking about how we design our spaces, is what does the low traffic environment actually need? Sorry. Of course, now I've got a tickle in my throat, which is never good in these times. Anyway, so yeah, these low stress environments, these traffic calm streets and the quiet car-free centers have really helped to melt away a lot of the stress that we were feeling in Vancouver, as much as we loved it there, and to some very positive effects. Sorry. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. I'm getting a throat lozenge. Goodness. Anyhow. So yeah, it was just obviously not a small move to come over here, but with that simple transition from a big city with some still high quality of life to a much smaller environment, the stress of leaving the house, of our kids going out on their own, getting to and from work, or even simple acts of shopping have become much more pleasurable and enjoyable because cities like Delft here in the Netherlands have really removed that traffic stress from a lot of the experience that people have of their cities. But it's not a secret how they've achieved that. I mean, I think many of you have probably seen countless pictures of glorious separated cycle tracks, fietsstraats, lots of network planning. This is Delft's network planning. So all those dark red lines are your busier thoroughfare roads. The bluer ones would be more your arterials or shopping streets. And then you have the green would be your connected cycleways between that. And what's really important about this in terms of thinking about how we plan our streets is that they're all connected. It's very intuitive. It's very rare that we get lost cycling around Delft. And I mean, I realize it's not that big of a city, but even still, cycling from one end to another, if we take a wrong turn, it's likely we can turn again very quickly and find ourselves on a quiet residential street that gets us where we need to go. And when we're thinking about how we're planning, it's really important to think in that realm. And so for yourselves as advocates working in pushing for cycling, this kind of network planning thinking is going to be really important. But there are a lot of experts that are much more geared towards talking about the nitty-gritty of network planning, how wide your cycle tracks need to be, where they should be intersecting, how fast the speed should be on these quieter streets, which is 30 kilometers an hour or less, but that much I do know. But what I want to do today is think a little bit beyond that infrastructure. So oftentimes when we're thinking about making these quieter streets, we're thinking about the infrastructure, the treatment of the streets, where they're intersecting, how they're intersecting together in terms of that safer space, how we're making space for walking, cycling, and cars. And what I really want to do is start pushing the conversation beyond that, not to stop having that conversation, but also couple it with a lot of the more human impacts when we're thinking about designing spaces. So I think this is really powerful. This is an image of the main square in Delft. So just on the left-hand side there, you can see the entrance to the Nieuwe Kerk, which is not that new. It's like over 600 years old, but still for Canadians, that seems super old. But I guess for the lifetime of Delft, that's not that old altogether. But still, it was a parking lot up till maybe 2 or 3 decades ago. It was where people would come to park, to travel into the city to do their shopping. And nowadays it's completely car free. And it's become this place where people can come and have intergenerational connections. Always lots of photos happening here. You've got children playing. Even in the pandemic, you often find families in the square playing soccer together, or football, sorry. And that impact of design has had this really positive impact on, or positive effect on, the overall health of the people enjoying the space. Not just from a physical standpoint, but also from a social connective and healthy social connections to your community standpoint, but also mentally. So people are much more happier, they're much more open, there's lots of smiling, people saying hello, and in more hostile environments, you lose a lot of that. And so that impact, as I said, that design can have on the social and mental health of people and how they connect with their communities is really, really important. And I think we often overlook that when we're focusing, because we're focusing so much on design, because we do need to still design these safer environments. But what I've learned through my experiences and researching the next book that'll come out is that traffic calming and network planning are universally beneficial, but not just in terms of creating safety, but also for really improving the quality of life for people. And for my part, I like to focus on the more underserved demographics. And so that's what I'll get into in terms of what this design means for how people that are often overlooked experience the city. So looking at children, at the disabled, at women, and at the elderly, how does this design really improve their health? And so we'll begin at the beginning. We'll begin with kids, and I'll begin with my kid's story. So growing up in Vancouver, they experienced a lot of life on 2 wheels with us, or slowly independently on their own. And it was fantastic. And they experienced the city in a much more visceral way. because it was much more personal to them. They weren't in a backseat of a car experiencing sort of that backseat generation view of life, but rather were side by side with us or in a trailer experiencing in that natural world around them. And it was great when they were with us. But when it came time for them to set out on their own, for in the case of our eldest daughter, who's now 14, but at the time was 12, it was harder for her to have that independence. We started to let her go and see friends on her own and travel a little more independently. The kids have both started walking to school, to our neighborhood school together on their own. But there was still that worry and that stress, not from the social danger, but rather from the traffic danger in our community. 150,000 cars is nothing to balk at when you're thinking of your 12 and 9-year-old traveling from their home to school every day. And so while they were experiencing a little bit of independence and freedom in that journey, there was a lot of restriction. There was a lot of lack of social connection that wasn't spontaneous or wasn't done on their own. And then we moved here, and we knew that it would change. And we knew that of what we had researched about the Netherlands and kids here being the happiest in the world several years over, according to the WHO, we knew that there would be a little bit more freedom experience, but we didn't quite understand what that impact would be. And I think the story of our son is sort of the most vital in that respect, in that within weeks of moving here, having always had either his big sister or us by his side to get to and from school, suddenly this 9-year-old was traveling about 5 kilometers each way every day to get to and from school on his bike, and at no point having to ride side by side with cars except on our quiet neighborhood streets. And that experience for him was one of great pride, because when he was able to do that, he was like, well, suddenly the world is wide open to me. I'm no longer stuck next to mom and dad to get around. I can discover the city on my own, which he does all the time. Every day now he takes a walk on his own around the city center to stay active while we're in lockdown, but also to just have some time to himself, to be away from mom and dad and his big sister. But also, traveling to nearby cities to visit friends that live a little further away. And that independence is immeasurable for him in terms of having more confidence to get around, to know where things are, to not be as scared about being on his own. And then from that, growing and really building that mental fortitude to be able to know what it is he wants to do. And that sort of mental health and that growth individually is as a result of this planning that has allowed him that independence and freedom from his parents, from other siblings, to be able to experience the world himself. And at the same time, we have a teenager now who's traveling not just within the city of Delft or some of the neighboring towns, but further off to The Hague to go and meet up with new friends and groups that she's met. She's managed to take the train, so connect with bike and train to get up to Groningen to meet friends up there. And that's a lot in part due to this really freeing environment that's allowed her that independence to move on her own and not have to have that additional stress of what it is to have to navigate very busy intersections and non-intuitive design. So it's really great for them, but then at the same time, it's also really great for us. And I'm sure there are a lot of parents watching that can attest that, having to take your kids from A to B to C all the time can take a toll on our daily lives. And now Chris and I find ourselves being able to let the kids do what they want on a Sunday and us go and in other times, going and experiencing the patios in Delft and enjoying a beer together without our kids and having a little bit of that taste of empty nesting, if you will. And so there's like all this residual just by creating the space for them to be able to move around on their own and really be able to feel a connection outside of their parents to the city where they live. And that independence ties in to the idea of access or accessibility to the city. And one of the things that's really stark when we're here is the number of people we see on adaptive cycles, on tricycles, on mobility scooters that utilize these traffic calm streets to get around and maintain their independence of mobility. We've been watching some conversations happening in our former hometown with the pandemic to see what's changing and what's happening there. And we found that one of the arguments that has been put forward to removing the extra lanes that they've put in to allow for physical distancing has been that access for people with disabilities. But what we've seen here is that when you provide that space, these individuals, they just want to be able to move on their own. They don't want to be dependent on someone else. And they have that. They can choose where they want to go. They can use whatever means they have to get around to maintain an independence of mobility, which not only allows them to stay physically active in whatever way and means that they can to move through their city, but also there's this mental relief they have. So the woman in the top right is actually a woman we interviewed for the next book coming out, and she talks about this feeling of freedom that she has because she doesn't have to depend on other people to get around her city. She can get from not just around Delft, so from where she lives in the city into the center, but also to neighboring cities simply by using the space that's been given to her that is safe and comfortable. And so there's something really profound about that I think we need to be reminding people when we're talking about why these spaces are really important, is that not only is it freedom and independence for children, but also freedom and independence for people with limited mobility. And yeah, I mean, what else can I say about that other than that? I mean, if we were all in that situation, we wouldn't want to find ourselves having to rely on others to get us around. And so if we can afford those people that respect to be able to choose how they get around and, you know, be able to have control over that, it's really important, which ties into the next group, which we will all be one day, the elderly or aging community. You know, when we're thinking about maintaining that independence and mobility, that extends to the elderly here. And again, whether it's adaptive cycles or regular cycles, or simply walking, the space here really provides that opportunity for them to stay active, stay mobile, and stay connected to the cities where they live. So these are very normal scenes that we see, not just in Delft, but in cities throughout the country, of elderly couples or on their own traveling around. And it's really inspiring to see them be able to stay active a lot longer. It doesn't mean they're these superhero humans that have managed to be able to cycle well into their old age. It just means that the cities have provided that space for them to do so. And what I think is really inspiring with that is that intergenerational connection that can happen because this community is not hidden away and isolated because they can't move around on their own. And the gentleman in the bottom right there, his name is Peter Decat. He is a former, well, I guess still kind of neighbor. We're not that far from our old place, but he lived just across the street from us at our last place. And he's seen cycling around all the time. He's a retired gentleman. His brother actually lives next door, and another brother lives further down the street. So he has a strong connection to the community, but he's also out bumping into people all the time. We see him in the city center. We see him chatting with other people. He's maintained this social connection to his city and to the people that live there because this traffic calmed environment, this low traffic or low car city has allowed him to be able to move around wherever he pleases and have these quieter spaces where he can talk to people and reconnect. And we really enjoy the moments we bump into Peter. Oftentimes we find ourselves stopped and chatting for 15 minutes and realize we need to get going. And it's just a product of this space that's really allowed us the chance to stop, take a breath, catch up, find out how his day is going. He actually is a handy person at my son's school, so we chat a bit about how Etienne is doing. And we just simply didn't have that same connection with our neighbors in Vancouver. And I think it's a loss, and I think it's something that every city should have. And so I think we should really be talking about this idea of maintaining that connection with every generation so that they can all learn from each other and feel a part of the community. And then finally, I'd be remiss not to talk about the role this design has on empowering women and changing the city into one that allows women to really not be limited in how they move around. And the reason I save this for last is because one of the things that we're finding, what we found in our research, is that oftentimes when we're thinking about women in design, which unfortunately hasn't happened for decades, just through a very male-dominated profession and a more economic man viewpoint of the city in terms of how we move is from 9 to 5 to get to and from work, and we forget about all the trips in between. And by taking more of a look at the places where everyone needs to go, especially women, to achieve care trips, whether that's taking kids to school, to the going to the doctor, visiting elderly family, or a trip chaining in terms of going shopping and having several stops along the way, that network planning I mentioned earlier really enables this ability to choose other modes rather than just the car to get around, because everything is connected. And it's, for me, has been really freeing. When I cycled around Vancouver, it was fantastic. I loved it. I loved being in the fresh air, but I always had to go out of my way to get to where I needed to go, which was really difficult and challenging when I had the kids with me when they were younger, or if I need to get to a programming session to pick them up, but I also need to get groceries. How do you combine all that when you have to go out of your way 6 or 7 times to do that? And this design now that I experience, where I can get to the grocery store, the kids' school, to my office, and anywhere in between in a fairly intuitive manner, really removes a lot of that stress from my day and allows me to, just take that moment to breathe, to slow down, to really enjoy the space. And when we think about design from that perspective, and we really start to push the conversation that way, everyone starts to benefit, because if we're making things intuitive and connected for women, we're also making it intuitive and connected for children, making it better for the disabled, and we're making it better for the elderly and everyone in between. So that's why I end here, because I think if we can take a look at how women experience the city, we can start to learn how a lot of other demographics experience the city as well, and start to push for planning and design that makes it easier for them, and then subsequently easier for everyone. So that's sort of where I finish. There's obviously a lot more that I could talk about, and I love talking about how cities are becoming more resilient and what we can do to make them more accessible to people with lower incomes and of more diversity, because it's really important. But that's kind of the key demographics I started with today sort of overlap a lot of those boundaries. And so that's why I focused in on that. But there's still lots to be learned, of course. If you want to get more into the detailed sort of planning and design that's worked here and is working in North America, if you haven't read this Building the Cycling City, it is still available. But Curbing Traffic, which is our second book, will delve more into those mental, physical, and social benefits that I talked about today. That is available for pre-order now. It will be released officially at the end of June, which is still a long way off, but you can pre-order it. But in the meantime, thank you again for having me. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. You can obviously find us on the socials if you haven't already, at Medacity Life. And thanks again.
Thank you so much, Melissa. That was fantastic. So we will open up questions in the chat box. And yes, so starting up already, we've certainly had lots of agreement. And I think your point about how the connection of being in a high traffic environment to stress, and how it can be so much calmer when you don't have that, I think that has resonated with a lot of people. And I will say for many of us who have visited the Netherlands and we take the ferry, it is such a moment when you get back off that ferry in the UK. It is instant. It hits you in the face, the stress, the chaos. It's just, I mean, it's not a particularly nice place to get off anyway, but so obvious that you can be so relaxed for weeks on end in the Netherlands, cycling around, and the minute you arrive back here, you feel that stress. So I think that's resonated with a lot of people.
Yeah. And it sort of mimics, sorry, I was going to say, it mimics an experience we've had in a few of the places we've visited since we've moved here. So we've been back to the UK. We've been to areas of France. We've been to Spain and to Switzerland. And in all of those instances, it was great to travel and experience new cities. But that's the one thing that impacted, like we immediately were like, oh, it's so busy and noisy. And we totally forget about it. and then we're reminded of what it is that we've come to really love about living here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't mean that it's not a busy place. There is still activity and so much going on. It's just that level of stress from the noise, the pollution, just the fear of being run over. Like it actually, it's amazing how much that builds up, and until you experience something else. Oh, why do I feel so different?
So we have a number of questions that have come in.
Yeah.
So the first question from Chris is, how do shops and businesses handle taking deliveries? Are vans and lorries allowed in? Or trucks for people who don't speak English?
I understand lorries. It's okay. I've been married to an Englishman long enough to know. So in every city, it's a little bit different, depending on how restrictive the car access is to the city centers. So in Delft, the trucks can still access a lot of the streets, and so they'll do their deliveries oftentimes most times in the mornings before a lot of the rush comes in. So usually if Chris and myself are out for a walk between like 9 and 11 or so, the lorries can still access to do their deliveries. In other cities, they have hydraulic bollards that will rise and fall depending on what time of day it is. So I know in the city of Nijmegen to the east, they're down in the daytime or in the morning time, so the trucks can come in and do their deliveries, and then they go up around 11 and then there's no access to the city center. And so that's sort of how they manage that kind of access, because of course the trucks still need to be able to enter. We still need to have goods in the city centers. And then for outside of the city center, oftentimes I haven't really seen any back alleys here, but there's plenty of space to be able to allow for those deliveries on the broader streets.
Great. A question from Wookie. Does the 9-year-old's mobility come from his peers, or did it spontaneously appear when he was given the opportunity?
I would say it's probably a combination thereof. I think growing up with us as parents, he was ready for some mobility independence, but definitely seeing, so I thought there was another question about what age do children enjoy or to have that independent mobility, and it's usually around 8 or 9 that you see kids start to travel to school on their own. So I think that combination of wanting to have that independence, but also seeing all of your peers also moving around independently, there's a bit of a light bulb that went off, like, oh, I can do this on my own. I don't need to have my parent hold my hand to get me there. And then having that really safe space to be able to travel. So for our son on that journey, it's traffic calmed, our neighborhood traffic calm street to a separated cycle track that gets him all the way to where he needs to go, with only one traffic light along the way. The rest is all protected roundabouts and then just separated space. So we don't stress, he doesn't stress. In fact, he actually got a little bit distracted and managed to have a tumble within the first few weeks of moving here, which took us to the hospital and had the nurse say, oh, well, you're gonna have to learn to ride a bike. And we're like, hey, he does know, he just got way too relaxed.
Question from Anna. Anna, do you want to ask this directly?
Yeah, I just regarding your kind of communication experience and expertise, I just wondered kind of what type of communications do you think have the most impact on like changing the minds of decision makers in the public about cycling and quality urban design?
Yeah, that's a great question. For us, what we found is the most successful is oftentimes putting away a lot of the extra data. So council meetings and things like that, I think it's really important to have that quantitative data behind you to support what you're trying to push for. But in terms of more public engagement, I think we can all attest that understanding how something will feel personally, how I will benefit from a more qualitative sort of aspect. So I will have less stress. I will be safer. I will have more social connection. Those kinds of arguments are often a lot more powerful. And that's what we found was very powerful with the communications we were doing and marketing we were doing in Vancouver, is when we were speaking from that perspective, we often found ourselves resonating a lot more with people that aren't already part of our cycling bubble. So they didn't already know, but it helped them to understand. And then of course, imagery is really important.
And do you also get like quite a, is there still people in the Netherlands that kind of fight against these kind of low traffic areas, or is this, yeah, there's still sort of battles to be won?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Don't for any second think that business owners aren't opposed to losing traffic spaces here or aren't in favor of wider highways. That kind of stuff is still fought for here by some parts of the communities. But I think for the most part, people now here understand what they stand to gain because it's been decades of this. So it's been a hard fight to get here. Don't get me wrong. There's been a lot of vitriol that we've heard about over the years. And it's still, you know, there are still battles to be fought around reallocation of space for example, bike parking. But I think politically speaking, there's less fear here to have more cycling friendly policies. From what I know of the UK, I understand that a lot of politicians can often be very fearful because they feel all of their constituents are against putting in more infrastructure because the loudest voices are the ones they hear the most. But yeah, I think, you know, just decades of seeing the results has meant that they can be a little more adventurous. And I'm confident that in time, a lot of other cities, well, Vancouver, for example, got to that point before we moved, where putting in a bike lane became slightly less controversial than it was just 10 years before. So
we got a question from Margaret. Safety has been the go-to for assessing the success of schemes because it is measurable. How are mental health benefits quantified?
That is an excellent question, and I don't know that I have the definitive answer for it. But I know with almost every project that's done, there's a lot of community engagement involved, and there are tools out there. I would have to do a little more digging to find out to find more direct links, but to send to you with that information. But having that public engagement, ask those more qualitative questions, like how has this changed your experience of the community, or what is your current experience? Noting that kind of qualitative data is the way to sort of measure that. And it's not easy because people don't often feel or often think about how it is that they feel traveling on a street, but that's how we can start gathering that, is by changing the questions that we ask. And that's what we're trying to do from a consultancy area, is making sure that engagement is looking much more at the social experience, the mental experience of the city, and not just on safety, because as you pointed out, it's really easy to say there are this fewer number of crashes, this fewer number of serious injury. But yeah, if we don't ask the questions about how people experience the space, then we'll never have that data. So that's how we need to start changing that a bit.
And just to follow up on that, does that require people to go out onto the street and stop people and ask them the questions, or is that done through some other means?
Well, I think that face-to-face question is really important. And we actually, in the first book, we talk about the city of Calgary, and that's actually what they did for a lot of their research and measuring in terms of how well the pop-up bike lanes were doing there, is actually stopping pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists at intersections and asking, you know, what has been your experience of the space? How could it be improved? You know, how is it doing well? And so, yeah, I think there always will be that element of that face-to-face communication, but then you can also build in things like social media campaigns and online campaigns, since you know, nowadays most people are pretty adept. But even just a very simple, you know, maybe more old-fashioned postcard campaign with an online survey would be a good way to get information from people as to, you know, how they have or are currently experiencing their city.
Okay, we've got another question from Gillian. Do you recommend any particular design guidelines to enable disabled to cycle? E.g., there's the Wheels for Wellbeing in the UK that has a design guide to account for wider cycles. Are there any other guides?
Well, I know that the CROW manual in the Netherlands does have a section on accessibility and how to design for adaptive cycles, and allowing also things like thinking of things like wider cargo bikes, so family bikes and things like that. So that would be a good manual. I think is there an English version, Chris? Sorry, I'm calling to the, there's an English version out there. So that's a good option. And then I believe NACTO also now in the US has a section, a fairly extensive section in their design guidelines for designing for all access. So those would be two that I would recommend to look at, but I'm very familiar with Wheels for Wellbeing, and it's obviously an excellent resource as well.
Okay, another question from Nigel. Does everyone you meet appreciate the benefit of having streets that are not dominated by motor traffic, or is there still a significant proportion of the population that still wants to be able to drive everywhere?
It's funny. I think getting to know people in the Netherlands over the last 2 years, I don't know that all of them appreciate what they have here in terms of these quieter streets. I think outside of the Netherlands, there's this presumption that everyone walks and cycles everywhere, but let me be the first to tell you that a lot of them own cars. Most of them own cars as well. It's just that they tend to use those cars more for like weekend trips or longer distance trips, but the trips within the city, they do predominantly on foot or bike. But what we found with our colleagues that haven't traveled more extensively and experienced other cities and what it's like to cycle there is that in talking to us and hearing our perspectives, there's this light bulb that goes off for them that's, oh yeah, I didn't even think about how quiet it was on this street or how easy it was for me to do this. So I think there are certainly parts of the population of the Netherlands that have been working in cycling advocacy and activism that are very appreciative of what these streets mean. But for the average citizen, most of them don't even think about it. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because that means that they don't have to think about it. And I would love for more people everywhere to be able to not have to think about how cycling is remarkable for them. So yeah, I think that would be my answer to the question.
So in the UK, when the pandemic really kicked in, we had a government edict to create more space for walking and cycling. That involved closing some roads, the odd bridge to private vehicles, etc. Was anything like that occurring in the Netherlands, or was it just situation normal?
To be honest, for the most part, it was situation normal because the space was already there. There were a few spots where there was more space given for walking because, I mean, if you've traveled here, you'll know that many of the sidewalks are not quite wide enough for passing people. And then we did here in Delft, there was a few streets that they were spaces that were largely shared by walking and cycling. So I'm thinking of the street that we always take to go and do our groceries was always busy with people walking and cycling. And then when the pandemic hit, signs went up throughout the city saying this space is now for walking, so please dismount, which most people obeyed. I mean, there's still the odd straggler that will cycle through despite the fact that there's clearly not space to get by. But that was sort of what they needed to do just to accommodate physical distancing. But yeah, for the most part, because of the infrastructure that was already in place, there wasn't too much in terms of temporary measures that had to be taken, like in the UK or France, Germany, etc.
Okay, got another question here. We're seeing cargo bikes being increasingly used on the school run. This is in Cambridge. And also graduating to business use. What's the impact of cargo bikes in the Netherlands?
So, yeah, that's an excellent question. Very similar. Largely, cargo bikes are more of have historically been more of a family tool to get kids to younger kids to and from school. You see them a lot more in bigger cities because although they still have the infrastructure, there's still, you know, a little bit of an increased stress. When you get into a bigger city, there are often more cars, more bikes. And so you see a lot more parents with cargo bikes. But on the flip side, a lot of delivery companies have really adapted to having cargo bikes for deliveries. So we often see in a lot of places the DHL Armadillos, that's the one with the cargo bike on the back, doing a lot of intercity deliveries. So they'll pick up at the outside of the city and bring the goods in. Cool Blue, which is, I don't know what the equivalent would be in the UK, but it's a large electronics company. They do all of their smaller deliveries by cargo bike. We even had this summer Delft test out garbage delivery or garbage pickup, sorry, in the city center, because there's this acknowledgement that we want, the city's old. A lot of our bridges can't handle some of the garbage trucks that are traveling through. And so they're looking at alternatives there. So basically the businesses would just call up the city, schedule a pickup, and they would come and get their recycling and their garbage. So they're becoming more and more prevalent in terms of the everyday business. So yeah, they're becoming a lot more commonplace than even when we were visiting here in 2016.
Hey, probably the second to last question. So Chris asked, how do you unpolarize the current somewhat hostile debate between us and them, where us are the cyclists and them are the very vocal, vociferous car drivers? Vociferous, sorry.
Yeah. I always get this question, and there's not, I mean, the easy answer is, I like to say, is to stop calling us cyclists and motorists and pedestrians, but just call us people moving through the city. It's a lot easier said than done. It's really hard to change that narrative, and especially now that we become more and more polarized, not just by our political views, but by our modes of travel. But yeah, I think the first conversation is to really remind people that the way they move around does not define them. And also reminding people that oftentimes there's a combination of modes in people's days. So when you're a motorist, you don't drive up to your dining room table. So reminding people that walking is a part of their daily existence, no matter where they go. But then also it's really important to really humanize. And so that's the work that Chris and I have done in terms of advocacy, has been to show people, instead of telling them, what these mobility options mean and who they're for. So showing the mom and the children, showing that elderly person that's walking to their grocery store. And just really reminding people that the car is not the only mode out there. And I feel like I'm going on a tangent, but it's also reminding people that not everybody can have a car. So kids can't drive, we know that. That's not a secret. So they don't own cars. So how are they moving around? But then, you know, the elderly, there's a certain point in our lives when we probably shouldn't be driving anymore. But then there's the faction in the middle that maybe can't afford to drive. And so if we say that it's us versus them, bikes versus cars, then where do these people fit in? If, you know, are they all cyclists automatically? Well, no. Are they all pedestrians? Probably at some point, but they also probably get around by bus. And so it's just reminding people that the car is not the default, and to assume that is, it does a disservice to a huge parts of our populations that can't afford to drive, are not able to drive. So yeah, it's not an easy fix. And I don't by any stretch of the imagination have this like magic wand you can just swish and it all goes away. And it's something that we still have conversations about online with people, but that human aspect and reminding people that the car is not the default are really important steps forward.
Okay, and Katie asks, is there really good public transport available and integrated with cycling routes?
Yes, that's the easy answer. So one of the really big benefits of moving around predominantly by bicycle here, and the allowance for that with the network planning, is that all of those networks integrate with public transport as well. So every train station in the country is connected to cycle routes. There's cycle parking at the train stations because they don't allow trains or bikes on the train here because it's just they can't accommodate the sheer number. When every person owns 1.5 bicycles, you can't allow them all on the trains. So that's why you have the big parking spaces. But then also that integrates with the tram networks, with the bus networks. So there's this seamless connection. And then on top of that, we have the national OV Fiets bike share, which is just through the tap card we all use to get onto the trains. You can rent a bike for a day for, I think it just went up to €4.15. And that gives you 24-hour access. So you have the bike to get you to the station, the train or bus or what have you to get you to your next destination, and then bike share on the other end to get you to where you want to go. So that seamless integration means that even though here, again, we still live without a car, we can get pretty much everywhere in the country pretty easily.
Okay, and then the final question is from Roxanne. I'll let Roxanne ask that one directly.
I won't ask my question because we've got a pretty tight time frame. And actually, I think, Melissa, your final answer was about the public transport was fantastic because it is absolutely key to the success of cycling in the Netherlands is how amazing the public transport network is and how that connects together. When you start studying what they've done there, it sort of is mind-blowing. And I'm so excited to see how you can do all of that with one card. You can even lock your share bike with your transport card now. I mean, the integration of this is just what makes it so fantastic. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Well, Melissa, I'd like to say a huge thank you for joining us for our AGM. I think we could easily sit here for another hour and ask you questions, but I think we'll be zoomed out by that point. So thank you for virtually visiting us in Cambridge. And all the best with your next next book, not novel, your next book. We can't wait to read it. And I'm sure that you may get a few more questions on Twitter and so on after this as well. But thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And if you find yourself or when you find yourself on this side, drop me a line and we'll be happy to take you for a ride and grab a beer on a patio somewhere.
That's right. I said one day when I can finally return, I'll take you out for a drink to say thank you. Rather than later. But we're seeing lots of applause in the chat for you, and you'd be getting a resounding applause if you were here in person. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Feel free to stick around for the next 15 minutes.
I'll probably head out because it's time to make dinner on this end, but thank you again, everyone. And it's great to be here for the talk.
Thanks, Melissa. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. I will switch on the screen and we shall continue with the next part of our AGM, which will be a very brisk walk through our Camcycle Awards. So the Camcycle Awards were introduced 3 years ago, so this will be our third round of Camcycle Awards, and really it was something that was so overdue to help to acknowledge all the amazing things that people are doing in our Camcycle and our Cambridgeshire cycling community. So the first award for the Camcycle Awards is our Partner of the Year. And please imagine that I'm holding an award and I'm about to hand it over to somebody. Nice shiny bit of bicycle stuff to hand over. But our Partner of the Year is Trisha Sutton from Connecting Through Crafting. So we first connected with Trisha at the start of the pandemic when the news came out that our local hospitals did not have enough scrubs and protective clothing. And the community very quickly leapt into action and started sewing scrubs and so on. But there was a bit of a logistical issue with transporting these items around the community, and I knew that we had a number of Camcycle volunteers who were just absolutely in need of some purpose to put behind their daily exercise. So we connected Trisha with in particular Alan and Matt, two Camcycle volunteers, and between them all they managed to deliver and move around a huge amount of scrubs and materials to people sewing and back to the hospitals and so on. It's been amazing to work with Trisha. It's helped give our community some purpose, and we've helped to deliver these scrubs in a sustainable way. So I think it's a good example of the more unusual partnerships that are possible, and I think we've seen more and more of these developing since we started working with connection through crafting. Great example of community. So thank you, Trisha, and really for reaching out to us and being very open-minded about what we could do by bike, because I think Trisha's like, are you sure? Are you sure you can cycle this far to pick up some scrubs in the wind and in the rain? I'm like, believe me, I'm sure it will happen. So thank you, Trisha, for being open-minded and giving our volunteers some purpose when maybe we couldn't do it. Our next award is for our Public Officers of the Year. And we've had to make this officers because this was a joint project. And I'm sure that you will all agree that Vanessa Kelly and Grant Weller from the Cambridgeshire County Council deserve a huge round of applause for their work on the Fendon Road roundabout. We called it a small piece of Dutch cycling heaven. And we know that it was a very challenging project to get through, but also it took some real imagination and drive to make something this aspirational happen. It takes champions to put the idea forward and follow them through. So huge thank you to Vanessa and Grant for their work on that, and we can't wait to see what piece of Dutch infrastructure you will bring us next. Now, we've already had some compliments for this next award, and that is for our magazine photo of the year. And this year it goes to Bill Blake for his incredible photo of the Abbey Chesterton Bridge. And I mean, this photo has been taken by kite. So thank you so much, Bill, for sharing these photos and allowing us to use these in our reports on the Chisholm Trail. It's been amazing in our magazine, but also how do you take pictures like this by kite? It's incredible. So thank you, Bill, and for your fabulous photo. Our next award is for our magazine article of the year, and this one goes to our new employee Rosamond Humphrey for her article with Steve Streets about marathon training by hand. And this was just, I mean, an incredible article on its own, but the way it resonated with local media and then got picked up by the Cambridge Independent, and then they did a big piece about Steve. I think it shows how we're leading the messaging here. But a great job, Rosie and Steve, working together to produce that wonderful article and the great photos that went with it as well. So well done, Rosie. Our campaign of the year goes to Adams Road, Save Your Cycle Route. Dan, what a force. I think we learned so much from you, and just your energy and your drive and your solid campaigning on Adams Road was remarkable. Just one, you succeeded, well done, but the number of signatures you received on your petition, the high profile support that you got, getting people to turn out in their numbers time and again to support that campaign was incredible. And I think you set a real example of how you can run your own local campaign, but how we can work with you, how Camcycle can help provide that extra support. But congratulations, Dan, wonderful campaigning there, and let's make sure we keep saving our cycle routes. Our next award goes to our newcomers of the year, and again, another example of people in their local area picking up and really making campaigning happen. And that goes to Gabrielle and Edward from the Milton Cycling Campaign. Here we go, I've got awards for you. We'll cycle them out to you, don't worry. So to see how you've formed a new group from scratch for your village, And from in no time at all, you've gone to so many supporters on your Facebook group. You've won a £15,000 grant to get cycle parking installed in your village. It's just incredible. So I think just a really great example of how you can make a difference happen in almost, really no time at all if you just pick it up and go with it. That said, I know you've been involved in cycle campaigning for longer than that, but really focusing on what you've done for Milton Cycling Campaign. And I've been asked just to clarify that grant was not from us. No, it was from the South Cambridgeshire District Council. But we are very pleased to have helped play a very small part in supporting you to get that. But that's all your work, Gabe and Ed. Congratulations. The next award goes to our Campaigner of the Year. And I should point out that this one, it's not a Camcycle campaign, but it's something we've just been so inspired by. And that is Sarah Swire for the St. Philip's Primary School, School Street. So Sarah's just been an absolute inspiration, picking up the School Street program, working out the volunteer recruitment, the engagement with parents, working with the school board, with the teachers, the council, and really just making this School Street happen. And Sarah is out there leading the way so that we can learn from her, from what St. Philip's School is doing, and help other schools to bring the same thing in. And it's great to go and create some content with Sarah, which has been viewed so many times on our social media to help inspire other schools, not just in Cambridge, but I would say around the country to bring in their own School Street. So congratulations, Sarah, really amazing example. Our next campaigner is our Regional Campaigner of the Year. And this is someone who, again, has started their own campaigning group. And we know that as of today, they got 1,000 Facebook followers. Well done, John, you made it. So our regional campaigner is John Morris for his incredible work with the Huntingdon and St. Ives area cycling campaign. It's been a delight to work with John and help support what they're doing, but John has just been an incredible advocate, so much energy. I get a lot of emails from John, who's doing so much and has really helped the Huntingdon, St. Neots, St. Ives area. So thank you, John, and we look forward to working with you some more. And hopefully we get some other areas picking up after your example. And then our Volunteer of the Year award goes to Ken Warner. Now, I think this might be one of the first awards I've ever handed out where I don't actually know what the volunteer looks like. So Ken, I hope I get to meet you in person one day soon. But it just goes to show there are so many ways that you can volunteer. And for Ken, that's been a huge amount of copy editing work for the Camcycle magazine. Ken has contributed a huge amount of research and feedback for our micromobility policy. We're receiving almost daily photos from Ken about the Chisholm Trail with those updates, which I think has just been so valuable for those people who haven't been able to get out and visit the site themselves due to various lockdown and restrictions. So keeping us informed has been a great job well done there. Thank you, Ken. So keep up that enthusiasm. We're getting some great comments there, Ken. But I do think it's interesting that I haven't met you yet, even though we talk regularly. And then our final volunteer award, which is our Lifetime Achievement Award. And I never feel like I'm the right person to announce a Lifetime Achievement Award because I haven't been involved with Camcycle since the very beginning. So I imagine there'll be a few comments popping up that we might be able to share. But our Lifetime Achievement Award goes to our very own minute taker today, Tim Burford. So congratulations, Tim. And Tim, we had a couple of nominations to put you forward for this. So this just isn't just us choosing this. We've been people from the community putting your name forward. And I couldn't believe the statistic when I read it. 32,000 photos on cycle streets. I think the only person who would have uploaded more would be Simon, as well as...
Sorry, Roxanne, just to interrupt you. He's just corrected you. 35,000 now.
I see. Well done, and perhaps more by the time you get back from Cornwall. So 35,000 photos on cycle streets, more than 20 years of dedication to our newsletter and our magazine. Again, incredible copy editing work, feedback for the magazine, contributing articles. And I'm not sure quite when you joined Camcycle, Tim, you might want to mention that, but I'd say it's been at least 20 years of supporting our work and as has been mentioned, taking minutes for the AGM. So thank you, Tim. That is about it, and I'm so sorry those awards felt like they were really raced through, but it's very hard when we don't have our person here. So I hope that we can all get together in the pub afterwards and share some stories with our award winners and let them know just how fantastic we think they are. We've had some incredible comments popping through here, so that is brilliant. So I'll very quickly wrap things up by saying the voting for the Camcycle trustee elections and the motion will close in, well, 1 minute, but let's say that's closed now. Would love to hear your thoughts on how the AGM went. Do send us an email. It's the first time we've ever done this online, and I will say it has been a huge amount of work, an astronomical amount of work has happened behind the scenes to bring this AGM together. So I must fit in some thank yous. Firstly, to our new staff member, Rosamond, thank you so much for you and for David Earl, the incredible work you have done together to work out how to make our online voting system work. And our registrations and so on. It has not been straightforward, but we wanted to make sure that our members had a true, proper, fair, well-organized, real election. So Rosie and David Earl, a huge amount of work. Thank you, thank you, thank you for what you've done. Must also say a huge amount of thanks to Anna for your work on our annual review. I was very unfair and I had a holiday, which probably did not help with this process at all, but Anna truly just picked it up and ran with it and produced something I think that a huge charity would be proud to call their annual review. And for us, our small organization, Camcycle, it's just incredible what you've produced. So thank you so much, Anna, for your work on our annual review and getting it done in time for today. And I think we mentioned the thank yous for Chris and Peter for their work on getting our finances together. But I think just to let our members know just how much work has happened to bring this to you today, and a huge thank you to those putting that work in.
And there's one other person we need to thank, which is somebody called Roxanne, who, without Roxanne at the leadership, leading all of these people she's just mentioned and organizing us all and making sure that things get done. Frankly, I don't know how this AGM got organized without her. So thank you very much.
Can I just add one more thanks as well to Willa, who, as we've said, she couldn't be here today, but she has been a fantastic trustee over the last few years, and we'll really miss her in 2021 in the trustee role.
Yeah, and Willa's moving on to do excellent work vaccinating lots and lots of people, as well as keeping us safe and healthy during the pandemic. So we are sad to see her go, but happy that she's doing that amazing work. Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Robin. Right, we are 2 minutes over. So I think we wrap that up. Always feels like a bit of a letdown that we're not off to the pub together and we haven't had cake, but I just want to say thank you so much to the more than 70 people who joined us this afternoon. We really appreciate your support. Yes, we will announce the results of voting as soon as we can, Bev, and all those who are asking, and hopefully we will see you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.